Welcome, everyone. My name is Abhi, and I'm the host for tonight. And welcome to Conscious Collective here. Today we have a beautiful event, a cause that's very close to my heart, something that's been very important in my spiritual journey: masculine-feminine integration. And at Conscious Collective, our whole purpose is tapping into the collective wisdom of everyday heroes that we have among us, so that together we can all rise up in consciousness, in love, wisdom, so that collective impact can happen. So a lot of you have been with us before, but a couple of new people, very warm welcome. So we organize a bunch of these community events, and there's always an option at the end if anyone feels called to donate, but otherwise they're all for the love of giving. All right. So without further ado, let me give you a little bit of structure for today. We have two really wonderful speakers with us to talk about conscious masculine and conscious feminine. I'll introduce them, and then we'll give you a little bit of context as to what this is about. And we'll invite then two of our beautiful speakers, Samantha and Yuying, to share a little bit of their journey. And then we'll also briefly touch on masculine, feminine from more energetic point of view for people here that are more spiritual. So we'll cover from the yogic point of view where that sits. And then, yeah, we'll open up the floor. And we are all about collective wisdom and sharing here. So we'll be pretty relaxed and easygoing. So we'll invite everyone, if you have any questions, any thoughts at the end, then please feel free to share. And throughout the event, also, if you have some question popping up, feel free to just put it in the chat box. Great. So, guys, I'm very excited to introduce two of our lovely speakers. We have Samantha here from the Self Club, and Yuying from...
Hi, everyone. Lovely to be here.
You're welcome, Sami. And Yuying is also a dear friend. He does a lot of beautiful work with Men's Group Melbourne. Welcome, Yuying.
Thanks, Abhi. Hi, everyone.
Nice. So let's start with why masculine, feminine integration. There are a bunch of ways. I feel as human beings, we always seek to find answers. I feel the whole human journey is towards oneness, towards wholeness, towards enlightenment, if you want to call it that. But in simple, practical words, we want to understand ourselves, we want to understand others, so we can have meaningful relationship with ourselves, with others. So there are a bunch of ways we can understand the world and the model of the world and ourselves, really. But what I will do, instead of me talking about why we're using this context, I'll invite my dear friend Sami, and she's done really wonderful work in this area. So Sami, can we invite you to start us off with as to why are we using this framework, masculine, feminine?
Yeah, and Abby, can I actually link that in with my personal story? Because it's actually quite connected now that I think about it.
Yes, perfect. Please do that.
Yeah, cool. Hi, everyone. It's really beautiful to be here tonight. Thanks for joining. And I'm also really passionate about this topic. And I love what the Conscious Collective does, because I think that these conversations are actually critical in the collective healing that we're all doing together. So it's just so great to be able to do it with you. Abhi, if you can mute Francisco, that would be great. Yeah, cool. And so, yeah, I think that I've been studying this topic for a while, and the way that it came into being in my life was the feminine became a thing a few years back when I personally realized that I was very work oriented and just like perfectionist and really hard on myself, and like would never allow myself to rest or to stop And I put so much pressure on doing and doing and doing, and I felt guilty if I stopped doing. And this concept of, the feminine, and even just like, this is not necessarily feminine, but like nurturing the soul and resting and dancing and singing, things that I also loved but didn't allow myself to do, were almost like given to me as an assignment. Like, no, now you have to wake up and dance every morning, and you have to go and like, and it was like, what? I can do those things. And so what it made me realize personally was come to understand that, we have been living in a world that has valued masculine principles over feminine ones, right? And this doesn't necessarily mean men or women, although I think we can also see it reflected in the genders and how we have been incarnated today in men and women. It's no secret, right? The repression that women and many other groups have faced over the past millennia. And this is not to, I certainly don't want to bring in any sort of like bash on the patriarchy or anything like that, because it's not about that either. Because the feminine has been repressed even in men, right? And in women. So it's like, and one of the ways that I entered this world was through emotional intelligence. I was an emotional intelligence teacher and, conscious leadership. And it was like, why we're studying emotional intelligence because as a society we're emotionally stupid. We don't know how to access our emotions, how to express them, how to feel them, and that is part of what the feminine is, right? So this concept of the masculine and the feminine, or the yin and the yang, they're really just like two of the basic aspects of the universe that we all have. And we can sort of sometimes in duality, when we come into earth, and all of earth is dual, right? Like, night and day and dark and light and masculine and feminine. It's just a frame to understand these two opposites that we have within ourselves. And I think it's a very useful one to get in touch with parts of ourselves, parts of our psyche that we might not have been in touch with, or might have repressed or been too attached to, right? So that's sort of why I think this framework is quite interesting for a lot of us that haven't accessed certain parts of ourselves. Hope that answers the question,
Yes,
Abhi.
wonderful. Thank you, Sammy. Yeah, so true, so true. And what I'll also now like to do is invite Yuying. Yuying is a dear friend. He's been doing wonderful work personally, and working with a bunch of men with Melbourne Men's group as well. Yuying, if I can also now invite you to, if you have some reflections on what Sammy said, and then if I can invite you to share a little bit of your journey, as well as to, what brings you to this world of conscious masculinity and masculine feminine integration.
Yeah, thanks, Abhi. Yeah, look, I resonate with a lot of Sammy's stuff as well. And what kind of got me started was in Joseph Campbell's work, The Hero's Journey. He talks about the separation and a call to adventure. And the separation is it's more of an internal separation, not a physical. And it could be, very subtle. It's just, I feel like there's something missing. I feel like there's more to life. I don't, have a purpose. Or it can be quite dramatic or major, trauma, a separation, a divorce, a death. For me, it was my separation. So that was my catalyst. And in terms of how the masculine and feminine came out of that period of confusion, anxiety and depression, was this question of, who am I? And who am I? And what is it to be a man? Because I felt like up to that point, my life was great. I was successful, and the money, the house, the family, the career. That was how I defined success. But then when the divorce happened, it felt like my whole life just fell apart. And so everything that I held as a benchmark of success just disintegrated. And so it left me absolutely at a loss of what didn't work. My life felt successful, but then it just fell apart. So it took me on a journey on self-discovery. People like Eckhart Tolle, Power of Now, The Untethered Soul, Buddhism, a lot of personal development to really dig down into my true nature, who I am, and slowly learning about the masculine, feminine. Samuel was saying the duality of that. And the picture that Abhi put up, the balancing act between the feminine and masculine. I think Sammy said, it's the yin and yang as well. Like for me, I see it as balancing. I see it as yin and yang, that I have masculine and feminine in me. My feminine does have a masculine element, and my masculine has a feminine element. There's also a non-duality that's evolving for me, which is the union of masculine and feminine into one, where it becomes a point source, just a light source. And for me, that's just basic humanity, just basic goodness. And as Sammy said, using the masculine and feminine is an amazing way to frame the discussion, to really turn it from concepts and language and to start experiencing it, because then that becomes personal. And that's for me where the growth is, that's where the transformation is. And that's where I really get to discover who I am. So yeah, that's been my journey.
Wonderful. Thank you. Sorry, Sammy.
If I can say something to that, thanks for sharing that, Yuying, that story. Like that was very vulnerable and beautiful, and powerful. And I wanted to touch on something you said, which was, I think as a society right now, you said, what is it to be a man, right? And I think that we are redefining what masculinity means and redefining what femininity means, right? And part of the, I see it as a rebellion to gender, right? For me is I am tired of what everyone says masculinity should look like, right? Being a man, being put into this box, and the same being a woman, the feminine, right? I want to define it on my own terms. And I think it is a beautiful opportunity if we're able to have these conversations. And as you said, you gave a class a few days ago on accessing wholeness through that integration, because in the West in particular, we tend to look for, like, we place a lot of value on romantic relationship, right? And that like other half, as if we needed somebody else to be complete, when really this framework is that opportunity to, rather than being in a wounded space, to think that somebody else could possibly complete us, right? To being able to find that completion and that inner union within ourselves, like absolutely. So yeah, beautiful.
You
to weave that in.
You talked about gender, and I guess what comes up is what you're talking about the expectation, whether it's social conditioning of gender roles. So how do you see gender roles changing, both kind of in society and you personally, Sammy?
Yeah, I want to first acknowledge something really interesting with this topic. I don't know if everyone feels the same, but I personally, and maybe and feel like when talking about feminism and stuff, like I have a little bit of fear around the topic, because there's this like, oh my God, am I going to say something wrong? Am I going to use the wrong term? Am I going to offend someone? And I'm going to personally I'm very direct, everyone, like, I'm going to call that out, because I think that we should all be free to express ourselves. And I think that when we're in a space where everyone is so wounded, we can't say anything, because God forbid if some person gets offended, right? So if anyone is offended, let me know and we'll continue the conversation, because I am so open to absolutely everyone's opinion. And I think everyone has the right to live their own life, be who they want to be, make the choices and define who they are. Yeah. So that being said, I do think that I personally see it as a coach and as a person who has studied the human psyche a lot. I see it as a deep confusion and rebellion of the old structures, and gender is part of those old structures. And I mean, me too, right? Like I like whatever I'm. I can be very masculine in a lot of ways, and I can be very feminine in a lot of ways. And I don't want my looks or, you know, who I incarnated in or my genitals or whatever, like to define what that's supposed to look like. So I think there's a healthy rebellion to it. But I also think not just with gender, but with feminism, with so many other movements in the world today, when they are fueled by woundedness and this part that, let's say, people that haven't done their part of the inner work and felt their emotions and their anger and their frustration, it's very easy to project that wounding onto the perpetrator. It's like every victim needs a villain, right? So I can easily, as a woman, I could be like, because men, and you did this for some, and it's like, what, how is that helping me or any of the women or men? How is that helping anyone for projecting like my wounding and the past and my pain and making somebody else wrong for the way that I feel? I don't think it's very useful in general. And I think that in this conversation with the gender, like there's some of that happening that is not very useful for any of the parties involved. So
Yes.
there's a deep healing,
Yeah.
and then yeah.
Can I say something to that? Thank you very much, Sammy. This was so beautiful, so impactful. I loved what you said, that any movement, be it feminism, be it masculinity now. I mean, I love to see, women have been conscious for a long, long time, and women's circle, really beautiful things, feminist movement, really wonderful. And, masculinity, men's group, probably last 20 years, really beautiful work as well. But what I personally felt that, yeah, if we all come from the sense of being wounded, and of course, I would be first one to say that, being men, of course, the society has been very patriarchal and we've been very unfair to women over generations. Or a man with feminine qualities, I suffered a lot because I was very close to my mother and sister and very much in touch with my feminine energy, let's say. And I suffered a lot. But yeah, I felt in past, I was coming from that space. And this is really our main motivation that Sammy, Yuying, and I, we all have got together is, for me, this is a next evolution in the consciousness movement, let's say. Is it's really nice over the last, 20 odd years, we've been doing this beautiful work in the masculine space and in feminine space. But our purpose here really is to sort of kind of do the inner work ourselves and come from the space of wholeness. And that's why masculine and feminine together. So we are having the dialogue and we are learning from each other as compared to, pointing fingers. And as Sammy said beautifully, finding someone to blame. So I feel from both sides there is pain and suffering and also learnings that we can get. So this is the idea of healthy masculinity, healthy femininity, and unhealthy. I mean, often term is used, wounded femininity or toxic masculinity. But okay, I like the term unhealthy. So, Yuying, can I also invite you to share any reflections on what we've just shared, and perhaps even your journey, and your take on unhealthy masculine. What are some of the unhealthy masculine traits, and what are some of the healthy masculine traits, and what, if any, of your journey that relates to?
Yeah, thanks, Abhi. I want to just reinforce what Samuel was saying about just the freedom of expression. I think within this discussion and just in general, anything that is experiential is your own personal experience. So I can only talk from my personal experience, but it's great we can talk in this environment. In terms of I guess the phases of my life, masculinity growing up was more of what I saw around me. So my role models, through my mum and dad. And I say mum and dad because, they were both equally influential in my life. And seeing their dynamic, then going through my teens and wanting to fit in, and social structures and peer groups and that sort of influence, and then initiation into adulthood. And when I look back on my life, I can see where that initiation to adulthood is really lacking in terms of really mentored rites of passage for boys to become men in a healthy, mature way. My initiation and rites of passage was turning 18, getting drunk, going to the strippers, and partying. And that was just what was done because that's what I was around, and I didn't know any better. And not that I didn't have, I didn't have the support and the mentoring to guide me in a way that that would go down that healthy path. And so, yeah, a lot of that unhealthy masculine came out, misogyny and, disrespecting women, aggressive behavior. And, I talked about my definitions of success, all very external. So it was how I needed to prove myself as a man. And even just the banter going around, man up, and, horrible stuff, don't be a pussy, don't be a girl, eat a cup of cement, like really brutal stuff. And Sammy talked about emotional intelligence. It's the complete opposite. It's emotional suppression. It's putting on personas and masks. And for me, I wanted to fit in. I had my own insecurities and feeling alone. I wanted to fit in. I wanted to belong. I wanted to be part of the wolf pack because I didn't know how to be a lone wolf. I didn't have the skills, the self-confidence, the self-awareness, the maturity to do that myself. So I was relying on my community, and that was my community at the time. And it was, it was only through separation and needing to be really responsible and accountable for myself. And I was really able to discover my own natural traits and allow a lot more of my expression to come through. Because even as a married man, I can look back now and see that I held, quite conservative gender roles. It's like, no, that's not my job. My job is to work. I'll do the garden, those sort of things. I did try to, I did like cooking and raising the kids, but there was still a barrier for me. There was still a separation. And so, yeah, the divorce and separation was an absolute catalyst for me to take 100% responsibility. 100% responsibility for all the pain and suffering that I'd caused myself over the years and I'd caused other people, and 100% responsibility and accountability for my joy and happiness and the joy and happiness of other people as well. And, the healthy, unhealthy insecurities, wounded past. And for me, a lot of it simply comes down to personal, unique experience, freedom of expression, and love and fear. That's how I kind of simplify it for me. So that's been my journey, and I'd love to hear other people's experience as well, because I'm here to learn as much from you guys. And as Sammy, Sammy's used the word collective, and I really believe in that we're all on our own individual journeys, but we're all going in the same direction. So, this community is very important.
Indeed. Thank you very much, Ray. That's a really beautiful share. Yeah, as growing up as men, it's so different, how we're expected to behave. And I loved how you shared our whole initiation in manhood, the rite of passage. Yeah, there's such a huge opportunity for that to be transformed. And yeah, I can relate to it. And also for me, one another interesting part was the cultural aspect, because coming from India, I'm generalizing here, but perhaps Indian culture is more feminine energy friendly. So it's very normal, Bollywood movies, watching romantic movies, talking about love, really expressing love openly, sharing the feelings. So for me, it was very interesting. I was 19 when I moved to Australia. So, I mean, anyways, I was perhaps a man more in touch with the feminine energy, even in India. So yeah, coming to Australia was wow. But bless, I mean, I was very lucky in Australia. I felt I was always accepted and loved for who I was. But yeah, it was really growing up. It was such a journey that even for my mother, yeah. So I'm such a lover of feminine energy, but yeah, often we don't realize, even as men, how much of struggle we go through for being in touch with our feminine energy. So yeah, this is yeah, such a lovely journey. Sammy, could we invite you if you have some thoughts to share or around this, or even your journey, from, and I mean, what is on, because I've heard a lot about toxic masculinity. That's something, talked about a lot, but perhaps unhealthy femininity, that's probably not something I've heard about enough, and I'm not sure if there is much awareness there. And we really want this to be that growth and healing and wholeness for everyone. So I'd love for you to share your thoughts on this.
Yeah, totally. I was just thinking, I think I talk and teach so much about this topic, but I don't that often like dive deep into my own experience with it. Like, and I was thinking, just to give that frame of the masculine and feminine and what it looks like, the masculine um is that like clear vision and like that protector and that like guiding force, right? And the feminine is that more like expressive and like radiant and like more flowing. I always say it's sort of like it's like a river, right? And the feminine is like the water, but if there's no like land to contain the water, there's no river, the water would just like blah, right? And that's kind of what the feminine does in its unhealthy expression. It's like just like is all over the place, right? This is like chaotic, changes all the time, dumps emotionally, right? It's very like victim like. And I'm just thinking about my journey, and I'm thinking that, well, so I've moved like 18 homes, and I've lived like in 10 different cities, in the past 3 decades. And I think that my life sort of like forced me, and I was also the first daughter, first granddaughter on one side. And I think I was always put in a position where I had to be very responsible and have a very developed like masculine side of like doing what needs to be done, like being disciplined. Like I didn't have the option of just like playing and being like, I think that was sort of like, I remember since I was like 6, just like waking up and preparing my own breakfast and going to school. So that was there. And then on the other hand, because I think that the way the masculine and the feminine play out in your parents are a lot of how what you sort of imitate and how you navigate this world, right? And in my case, like my mom, she has a very she's a she's like a feminine powerhouse. But because I admired my dad so much and like craved my dad's love more than my mom's when I was younger, I wanted to be like my dad. So I became more, I elevated the masculine. So I became like hyper competitive, and like everything in my household with my dad was like a debate. So I always wanted to be right, right? Which is one of like the unhealthy masculine traits, always wanting to be right. And then I also took a lot of my dad's unhealthy feminine, which was becoming a victim, right? So it's like very victim like, and like, oh, you the unhealthy feminine is like wants to be saved. It's like, oh, save me, right? Like, and I used to have these thoughts that was like a lot of the time that was like, everyone always lets me down, right? The thought that came recurringly throughout my life. And like wanting somebody else to come and fix whatever I was feeling, right? Instead of just like owning it myself and being fully in it. So yeah, it's a bit of that like needy, right? A little bit of like that neediness where you're not enough within yourself and you need somebody else to make a decision, to fix something, to be something. Um, so yeah, that's a little bit how it played out within me. And then slowly I used that masculine. I did a lot of like work of with my own ego, right? Because that's sort of that unhealthy masculine is like that ego that wants to protect itself, and allowing more of the feminine and being more allowing and not needing to be right, right? And like just like being expressive. And I think that's why I always was angry at my mom, because I think she embodied the feminine that I wouldn't allow myself to be, right? Because she was just like, oh, so expressive and arrive and just like, oh, and then there I was having to be, because my parents got divorced at an early age. Like I almost was like the man, right? I was like, don't speak so loud, and like you're making people uncomfortable. And what I truly probably craved deep down was for me to be able to bring that out and to not always have to be the responsible one, right? And the decisive one, and to be able to play and let go and express and relax, right, into my own femininity, which I'm still, by the way, learning to do. And to finish, like what I do now is having this understanding. I've used my masculine, which is quite developed, to protect my feminine fiercely, right? So, for example, like protecting my playtime or protecting my morning routine or my dance, right? So I use him to create these sacred spaces for my feminine to be able to come alive and to be able to have spaces where I can surrender and let go. And it's still work. Like my masculine is still probably not overdeveloped, because I'm also very intuitive and I'm very in tune with other people's emotions. I suppose that what I allow myself to do more as I've integrated the feminine is to listen to that more. Because before it was like, oh, if I made a decision based on my intuition, it was like, oh, no, no. A decision has to be made based on logic. Then it's okay. But if it's based on intuition or emotions, then you're just not, you're not on the right path. And now it's like, no, wait. That's not how it works, actually. The masculine, like my masculine, my decisiveness and what I fight for and what I stand for, that has to be at the service of my feminine. It has to be at the service of my emotions and of my intuition and of my deep desires and what comes alive through me. Because if my masculine is defending something, and I'm saying within myself, but also in the world, right? If the masculine is defending something that's not coming from heart and from love and from a deep, deep knowing. What I curse sometimes, I'm gonna try not to curse. What is it defending? Right? It's like it's like when you're having a debate and I'm like trying to be right. What's the point of being right if then everyone feels like terrible in the conversation? Like, what am I defending? Right? So I learned to defend the things that truly are worthy of defending. And to know what that is, you need a really deep connection with the feminine. You need a deep connection to the heart, to the soul, to the womb, right? To that energy. And that's how you know what to protect with your masculine. Now it's a little bit of my story.
Yeah, that integration you're talking about, that blended mix, not letting one overtake the other, but having them work in union is, yeah, absolutely spot on. And do you find, like for me, I find that it's not a logical process to that awareness and that intuition. It comes within the body. It's more of an embodied intuition. Is that what you find, Sammy? Or how do you gain that awareness of the balance and that integration?
Yeah, I think that's a great point and question, because I have to work, right, on my mind not overriding. And if I feel something in the body, like honoring that, and being like, no, if it's coming up in my body and I'm shaking, it doesn't matter if my mind comes in and says, oh, you're so stupid for shaking, you shouldn't be shaking, because why, you know, it's like, no, if I'm shaking right now, this must be really important, right? Like I must have either some sort of trauma around this or deep wound, you know, like there's something that needs to be looked at. And then it's a no, right? Like my body does give me really deep wisdom and information, but it's like almost I need to use my mind to be like, okay, mind, you need to listen to your body. And then I give that permission. And then suddenly how my body speaks to me becomes more relevant and important, you know?
Then there's another level of integration. So there's integration between the masculine and feminine, integration between love and fear. You know, I see fear as it's not a thing to shy away from. It's actually protective. It's as much part of love as the masculine and feminine, and also the head and heart, the integration there. So that's coming through really strong. Just the integration on all of those levels.
Yeah.
So nice, so nice. Yeah.
But maybe I don't know. Maybe we can throw it open to the group. What's going through your minds? What's coming up? You know, what are the emotions coming up? What are the experiences in your life that that you know you can talk to in terms of the masculine, feminine role models, different phases? You know, what's your perspective and your experience?
Yeah, great idea. Speaking of collective, let's throw it out to the collective. We want to throw it out.
I think Thelma
yes.
unmuted herself.
Yes. I was pointing to Thelma because
Hey everyone, if there's a lot of background noise, I'm sorry, but I do have a senior and a kid in the house. They are both very noisy. But anyway, I just wanted to share a little bit of my journey. And it is, Sammy was saying some things that I recognized in my journey as well. But I come from a very strong family where all the women have their masculine side very, what is the word? It's very like they show more the masculine side than the feminine side. And my mom was always focused on me, on how I needed to be strong and I needed to, you know, raise my voice and I needed to do all these things. But at the same time, when I became a teenager, she was afraid that I had all this masculine side, and that meant that I wouldn't get a boyfriend. And she got really, really scared. So my whole teenage life was very focused on you can't be all the boys like friend and sister. You have to show your feminine side. And at the time, I didn't have the voice to look at her and say, how? You never showed me. And as Abhi said, that he was very, very close to his mom and his aunt, and he had all these feelings and he was in touch with these feelings. From me was the opposite. So I was very in touch with sports and boys things and, you know, Formula One and cars and motorcycles. And at school, everyone kept saying that I was a lesbian. And that doesn't even make sense nowadays that I think about. That doesn't even make sense, right? But I think that it took me a long time to get the knowledge and to reflect on it. And I think the main thing that happened to me that made me start thinking about this, about the feminine and masculine and how important it is to have integrated instead of having separated, was the birth of my son. I never thought I would have a son. I didn't know how to raise a boy. I had 5 cousins, all girls, care of them all. But then a boy came and I was like, okay. And then I started thinking about how to raise a boy, how to raise a man, what does that mean? And my husband, he's not that what people think about what it is to be a man. He's not sports. We are actually the opposite in this regard. So people would see me as the masculine side of the couple and him as the feminine side of the couple. And just looking at my son and learning about all this, and I saw how important it was to be emotionally intelligent, as Sammy was saying, because children come to this world perfectly. They are perfect, and they are very empathetic, and they understand their bodies. They listen to their bodies, so they know when they are full, right? When they ate enough. But we are like, no, eat more. You have to eat more. Or they start crying because they are sad, and we're like, no, stop crying. And my son heard a lot from his grandma who lives with me. Yeah, she kept saying like, stop crying, you're a boy. And I had to start saying, yes, but boys cry too. And it's healthy that he cries. So this made me realize how much I needed to start studying about it. And I'm still in my journey of studying, but I see it every day in me and in my husband and in my son, how important it is to have this integration and how important it is for us to listen to our bodies. And sometimes I'll show more my feminine side, sometimes I'll show more my masculine side, but we are all perfect, we are all complete. We don't need another person to complete us. And yes, and now I'm studying social work and working a lot to teach other parents about how to raise girls and boys the same way, having this integration. Yes,
Fantastic.
that's it.
Well done, Thelma. It was interesting. You talked about, boys don't cry or don't do that, don't do that. It's amazing how much subtle shaming we project onto kids to be a certain way or to not be a certain way. And yeah, we do it because it was done to us. We talk about trauma and wounded past, and it's not just in our lifetime. It's a generational thing. It's a cultural thing. It's a social thing. And we're the product of generations past. We have our grandparents in us and their grandparents, but we're also that ripple effect that influence and impact future generations. And I'm not going to get it right in my generation. I've got too many wounds I'm carrying from the past, but I can, if I can just steer just that little bit, and it might not be perceptible now, but down the track it makes a major shift. And the changes that you're doing, for yourself and for your kids, the payoff is not in our lifetime, it's in generations time. And I think having that perspective of humanity and our place and purpose is bigger than us. And I think so thank you for sharing, Thelma.
Really wonderful share. Thank you. Sorry, Jeff, did you want to say something?
Yeah, sorry, I went to sleep there. I've had a wine. Just, I guess, a couple of general observations, Abhi. Well, from what everybody's discussed, I wholly agree with you. Some of the macho behaviour in males in Australia is been questionable in the past, but I think it's pretty amazing that we, in general, and I'm making assumptions here, but I think in general, as a society, we're progressing pretty quickly, especially through discussion groups like this. We are making leaps and bounds. And, a generation ago, it might have been all talk about football and meat pies and cars. And now it's talking about relationships and girlfriends and he said, she said, and how can we make it better? And that's a huge step forward. And it's happening here every day. I see my kids going through this completely different discussion on their lips than what it is in from my generation. So I think we need to congratulate ourselves to some degree and keep the discussion going. One thing I wanted probably more to just get some feedback or interest on. I spent quite a bit of time in India working and met some amazing people on my journey, and found that an enormous amount of positions of power were held by women. And that was quite confronting to some degree. The women had control, they had power, they showed it, they discussed it, and they didn't hesitate to use it. And what I saw happening there, and this is just my personal experience, was that the feminine side was sort of almost pushed aside while they were given those roles of power, and their masculine side was brought forward so that they could take control and get the job done. And it was really interesting watching that occur, and watching the feminine side sort of get pushed aside, which I have to say in India, as I think you mentioned, there's probably a more sort of level playing field on the masculine feminine side with both genders, probably more than here. So it was fascinating to watch that power struggle with the women who were given the power, but then they, in some respects, tended to almost abuse it because they were struggling with the issue of their repressing their feminine side as they took control over situations. And I guess that happens, you know, when there's a question of who takes power and who has to make the decisions. But look, just as a probably more of an interesting sort of perspective, is my question is probably more about, is this a Western discussion? Is this a Western perspective that we're discussing tonight? Is this something that is really happening in Australia or the US, maybe, you know, parts of Europe? Because I'd love to get your feedback. I think there's a bit of a multicultural group here, and I'd love to get your feedback as to whether these discussions go on in, you know, cultures that sort of still celebrate Tibetan Buddhism or Chinese ancient philosophies or Islamic perspectives. Are they having these discussions? Should they, or do they have a completely different perspective on these things? I don't know. I'd be interested to hear of anybody who's experienced with that.
Can I share something on that?
Absolutely.
This is really interesting. Wow. I'm loving this. This is getting very juicy, you know, and Yuying, as you said, when you tap into the collective, you know, you just never know how beautiful and deep you can get. So what you mentioned is very, very interesting. So in India, it's funny. We think about, you know, such traditional male country, but okay, let me take you guys, some of you may be familiar, but if you actually go back in the history, so India was potentially one of the first countries in the world to be so equal opportunities. And if you look at some of the Indian literature, we had female sages and saints from like 5,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago, so many goddesses who had the power. It was really interesting until probably about 11th, 12th century. So you will actually see lots of female scholars. So if you, in India, it was considered sort of the golden age, especially from 5th century to the 12th century. So it was amazing. You might see so much of openness. One part of it is, you know, the whole modern, semi-modern Tantra, Kama Sutra, very open expressions, lots of female scholars and leaders. But unfortunately, that all changed from 12th century when there was invasion from Iran, when the Mughals came, the Islamic invasion came, and that actually changed. So a lot of what we think of India is India that is been from more sort of 12th, 13th century. But back in early days, it was a very feminine, energy-friendly country. Now, coming back to Jeff, what you mentioned, and this is true, contrary to people's beliefs, I mean, in India, we had first Indian Prime Minister in 1970, when, I mean, Australia, we're still, most Western countries were still far behind from having a female Prime Minister, and India had it. But yeah, Jeff, you're very right, because in a way, it's been such well-defined roles, masculine and feminine. So it's always been like masculine leadership, especially in, last couple of 100 years at least, that consciously or unconsciously, women feel that, yeah, especially in the position of leadership, they really have to sort of almost assert the power. And to be honest, I dare say that some of it is actually unconscious. They're not even consciously doing it, but that's kind of what people think, that you have to do it. And especially maybe there is a feeling that, oh, if you're a woman, then, maybe then people might discount you a little bit unless you really show your fierce side. But yeah, in India, I can definitely say in last sort of 10 years or so, there's definitely a lot of conversations that have started. They've been more and more in the bigger cities. But yeah, slowly, that is happening in countries like India. But also we have some other complex dynamic. I mean, this is where conversation gets more juicy. And now I'd like to even invite others to talk about this as well. But see, the interesting thing, I'm generalizing here, but in the West, many women, I can say, like the idea of having equality, equity, whatever we want to call it. But the funny dynamics in countries like India and some other parts of Asia, many women actually don't want that. They're actually very happy with the traditional gender roles. So they're like, no, this is good. And in a way, I mean, if I really have to look at the positive side, there is no confusion, everybody's very clear. I mean, majority of people are very clear. So this adds added dimension where even some of my female friends, they're like, no need, this stuff, gender equality, gender equity is nah, we're happy with our traditional role. It works well. So yeah, if I can open the floor and go on, Sim.
Yeah, I wanted to also speak to that, in that I don't know much about, Jeff, about the conversations that are happening in these places, because I do have a Western perspective, even if a lot of the things that we study in the West come from the East, right? But I know that, for example, I'm reading right now about Hindu mythology, right? And a lot of the basics of what I teach with the feminine and masculine comes from this idea that of Shiva and Shakti, which are the feminine and masculine counterpart of this being that incarnated from divinity into earth, and was split into these two parts. And I'm reading this book right now. I was actually just reading this chapter a few days ago, which really fascinated me. Every god has like this goddess counterpart, and that they balance each other out, right, in this just complementary way. And also in when the yin yang is one of the most famous symbols in the world, right, that comes from Eastern traditions, which is also that symbolism of the perfect masculine and feminine, because there's no masculine without feminine. It's like this way of understanding duality. And another thing that came to mind when you were saying that is that the Dalai Lama said in the 2005 Peace Summit in Vancouver, he said, "The world will be saved by the Western woman," right? And I think that when I first heard that, I thought it was extremely powerful, because I have a friend who's Russian Japanese, but she grew up in Japan, and she recently did one of my women's 12-week programs, and she was telling me, wow, this is like the work that we did together was just blew her mind. And she's like, how can I bring this to Japan, where people like wouldn't even question these things, they wouldn't even question their own roles. And there's a deep, I don't know, right, what it is, if it's complacency, if it's fear, if it's just conformity, right, or if they're just simply truly happy. I cannot say, I cannot speak for them, But they seem, what she tells me anyway, is that they seem to just question their roles less than perhaps the women are in the West, which I think is interesting, is interesting. And the last thing I wanted to speak to, this, I thought it was really fascinating what you said about the women in position of power in India, because I think there's two dimensions to this. One of them is that, well, to lead, you have to be able to access your feminine and your masculine. Like the feminine is that heart and that empathy and that being at the service of something bigger than yourself. You have to be able to tap into that masculine, which is not caring or leaving to one side what everyone thinks when you know what has to be done, being able to be decisive, being able to leave emotions to one side momentarily until the moment comes to be able to deal with them. There is that tapping into the deep masculine that is required for positions of leadership. And then there's another side of this coin, which I think is, can we, and I have a really good friend, which I'm having a conversation about this on my podcast in a few days. She is the CEO of a business that is all women led. And the conversations I have with her is, how can we bring in feminine principles into leadership and into ways of doing business, so that the women that come into positions of leadership don't feel that they have to sacrifice and repress and push to one side a huge part of themselves to be able to fit in to the positions and the roles and the way we've defined leadership and power today. So I think it's an interesting discussion there.
Wow, so interesting. I love, Sammy, how you said, bringing more feminine values into business, because I mean, we have some such conscious, powerful, impactful women in this group here as well. So I love that idea, how you can lead more feminine principles. But yeah, I wonder if anyone here would like to share their thoughts.
There are any questions as well, welcome. Yeah.
I see Martha is unmuted.
Okay. Yeah, I hope you can all hear me well. Hi, everyone. This is a lovely conversation. I'm not sharing my face too much because I'm in the middle of work. So I'm from Kenya. I am a powerful woman. I'm a leader. I'm an entrepreneur. So I could relate a lot to all these things that you're discussing. And I also work in the gender equity space.
I think we might have lost Martha.
Let's give it just 30 seconds and see if Martha. Let's do a magical spell. Om Swaha.
But yeah, following on from what Sammy said about Dalai Lama's comment, and I feel that there is a shift, as Jeff was saying, and there was a clip from, I think, Jack Ma, I think he was Alibaba or AliExpress, one of the biggest companies in the world, and he talks about the essence of leadership, IQ and EQ, which is constantly evolving, but he talks about CQ, so community quotient, and LQ, love quotient. So it is something that will take time, because there's so much inertia from the patriarchy and the old ways of doing things, but it is getting airtime, and I think that's where there's really good change and some really good hope. And Jeff, what you were saying about maybe Western versus Eastern, I just realized, like, I've been wearing this pendant for 20 odd years that my mum gave me, and on one side there's a dragon, and the other side is a phoenix, and it, in many ways, it represents masculine and feminine. And I think in the East there's a bit more of a acknowledgement of the harmony between the two, that I think someone said before, it's two sides of the same coin rather than separation.
Yeah, 100%. Two sides of the same coin is so cool. And towards the end, before we close, we will do a really lovely practice to kind of, on a physical level, energetic level, feel the two sides of the same coin. But guys, we have Martha with us as well, all the way from Kenya. Martha.
Oh, I dropped out. Sorry, I dropped out. Can you hear me?
So good. Yes.
Oh, okay. No, yeah. So I was saying, and I work in the gender equity space, so I can totally relate to all the what's going on in the conversation. To answer Jeff's question on, is this a global conversation? Absolutely. I think there are many. It may not be in 200 countries across the world, but many communities are. I can see the word awakening. Are awakening to this idea of, I don't know about balancing and integrating, but sort of like finding that yin yang of moving between the two energies to live more balanced lives and to live more balanced lives. And there was something around, I stepped in when Samantha was talking about healing and our woods. And I think for me, that's where it all comes, like all comes down to that. Doesn't matter feminine, masculine, it's all about how can we live much more consciously and much more mindfully, despite who we are interacting with. So I was like, oh, this call, should I drop out at that point? So I really resonated with that, but lovely to hear everything that was being shared today. I wanted to say more things, but time's up, so.
Such a wonderful share. And guys, Martha does amazing work like so many other women here as well, especially being in a place like Africa, East Africa, such beautiful work in different communities across East Africa and stuff she does. So yeah, I love it. And I think this is the power of our collective, of our Sangha, as we say, our communities, our community of purpose, that, so much of diversity here and such, beauty of experiences. But yeah, can we invite anyone else that hasn't shared yet, if you would like to share, your perspective, your journey, your thoughts, and please feel free to.
Can I have a quick share? Kind of touching on what Jeff shared, I really liked sort of talking about the reflection of kind of where we're at from an evolutionary perspective of us as a species of human beings, really, and the fact that we are at that point in time of moving, almost kind of like transcending our biology and evolutionary norms, which was men in the masculine for survival and women in the feminine for nurturing, in those like really ancient types of roles. And I just think that it's, like I have a lot of gratitude about this conversation. Like I just wanted to share that. And I think it's wonderful that we're at that point where we've kind of moved up, almost like Maslow's hierarchy of needs and kind of to self-actualization, and where we can go from, who knows? But it's like, if we can create that integration of the masculine and feminine forces, I really feel that that will be unbelievably transformational for the world. And what can we do with that then? Who knows? But I'm really excited for that. So just wanted to share my brief thoughts on the general conversation. So yeah.
Absolutely. And look, this is so true. I feel there's so many frameworks, methodologies, but yeah, something that really resonates deeply within me is, masculine, feminine integration. So yeah, and I'm really glad that this is a conversation we are having. People from different parts of the world, people from different ethnic backgrounds, men, women, we're all together in this, consciousness movement, as you can say. uh, are there any final thoughts or questions that are coming up for people?
I just had one sort of reflection around, there's always talk about masculinity and femininity around work and parenthood and very like structured roles, but I think it can be a bit more fluid as well, and trying to balance the different energies in the broader parts of my life, or having them more fluid and not kind of set, oh, I'm going to be masculine at work today and I'm going to balance that by being feminine in my hobbies and having it so in a box. I'm trying to work on, I guess, having them blend and not being as structured and masculine about how they're going to blend as well. I think I really echo Samantha saying, like, setting time to do it, and that helped me a lot in my calendar and structuring time and space to do it. But also, like, there's so many ways to express masculinity and femininity, and just by exploring how they can come about naturally has been really interesting, instead of like projecting what I think is going to give me some sort of feminine energy. So yeah,
I
just
wanted
being
to
like
say
playful with it.
something to that, Caitlin. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is like one of my friends who runs this business. One of the ways she does it in her work is by really honoring the menstrual cycle, right? And so every woman like checks in to what phase of the menstrual cycle she's in, and that really did, because well, that's part of what we teach, is that like the 4 stages of the menstrual cycle and how the energy levels are in each one of them and what that means for you. And there's half of the month where you have a lot more energy and half of the month where you go more inwards and have less energy, right? And really like making it your duty to listen to that and share that with others, that allows others to hold that space for you. And some days you can work for 12 hours nonstop, and other days you work for 3 and you need a nap.
Yeah, totally.
So yeah. I thought
I
that
heard there was
really
like
cool.
a week that's like me, and a week that's like 2 weeks that's us, and a week that's you, or something, of like the hormonal change and what's like best to focus on and things like that, which I didn't know about till last year, and I was like, this seems like something I should have learned like I'm a little earlier in my life.
Yeah, all of us.
Yeah,
it's crazy. Yeah.
yeah. Super interesting.
Yeah, thanks
Thank
for
you.
sharing.
No worries.
Such a nice share, guys. Thank you so much. And what we are hoping to do, and this is such a beautiful conversation, but I feel this is something, I mean, this one session is so beautiful, but I feel there is so much to it, that we can go deeper and uncover and, heal and share. I'm just curious to gauge some sort of interest. Who here, give us a show of hand if you think if we should kind of have this as an ongoing dialogue in a little bit of a mini series. Is that something that we should do? Would that interest people? Is this a meaningful work that we should continue pursuing? Okay, great. So yeah, we will continue this topic of masculine feminine integration because I feel there is so much of healing and wholeness that would happen through this individually and collectively. And what we are really working with, one of the dreams I have, and within Conscious Collective, is because we typically always tend to turn to the experts in the field, or listen to this great expert, listen to that great expert, and okay, we do sort of have an expert here in form of Sammy, but the idea really here, what we're really tapping into is sort of bringing out our everyday heroes, and we have such deep wisdom within us, but I feel in a way we're trained to say, oh no, we're not allowed to say something or share something. Who am I to teach or share? I know Yuying and I, we've had some of these conversations. So our vision really is tapping into, sort of everyday humans and sharing that collective wisdom. So this would also be theme for our events moving forward, sort of bringing out our everyday heroes.
And can I say something about that, Abby, really quickly? I just think that's so important because in a world where we weren't taught these models of relating, right? And we weren't taught masculinity and femininity, and there's like these societal expectations, when we hear other stories, it like gives us permission to do something different. It's incredible, right? It's like you hear somebody, I don't know, talking about their menstruation at work, you're like, oh, I could do that too, right? And I hear how Telma's raising her son, and I'm like, oh wow, like it those stories give us like more options of how to live, and we're all just figuring it out. Like, I certainly don't have the answer to any of this stuff. Like, we're all just figuring it out, and it's so important to have them, and like you said, have everyone share how they're doing it, what's working, what's not working, and how it plays out. Learn from each other.
Absolutely. And it just normalizes, so much stigma that society places on, like people who speak out and have strong views. And, it's a very shaming culture. Look at social media, and it's all about shaming anyone who stands out or who has controversial views. So yeah, I think a big part of this is just that freedom to express, freedom of unique self-expression, which comes back to what Thelma was, saying about parenting. I think that's probably, for me, a big part of my parenting style is to bring out just naturally who my kids are, and that's what we all deserve, whether kids or adults.
Yeah, 100%. And guys, we are so lucky because we have a few really lovely conscious parents here. I mean, the two at least I know is Thelma and Yuying, that do such beautiful work with their kids. And I'm sure there are a few others. I'm sure other people, Jeff and a few others, are within that space. So we will definitely make this one of our future topics. I think the whole idea of conscious parenting, or masculine, feminine integration, how that plays out with kids and as parents. So yeah, and yes, the recording, and this is part of the reason why we are recording this as well. So we will make the recording available. We'll firstly share it within our Conscious Collective group. I know most of you are already part of the Conscious Collective Facebook group, but a couple of others that have come through friends or through Meetup, please look us up on Facebook. Our group is called Conscious Collective, but on Facebook we spell the collective with a K, so conscious and then K, collective. I'll type in the chat box as well. So please connect, because the whole idea is, if we are truly seeking a collective awakening, then the idea is we all have the conversation and dialogue on an ongoing basis, and yeah, this is where we make a difference. And what we also do, guys, see, as I briefly was saying in the beginning, the idea for these events, Sammy, Yuying have been very kind in just donating their time. So something that we are working towards is having a more unique model, a good karma kind of model, where we come together and find our healing, raise our consciousness. But there will be an option where we'll invite whoever feel called to give a donation, and what we will actually do with it, in the spirit of truly making our world a better place, is then donating it to people in need. So right now I live in Footscray, and we have a really lovely local group here that feeds the homeless people even throughout COVID lockdown and stuff like that. And they're just a little local group. They make the food themselves, and in big bunches, and they share. So right now we are doing a little bit of fundraising for them. So later I'll share the link. So if anyone feels called to, then feel free to donate. And moving forward, our idea is to have the options to donate, and then we may even a couple of really worthwhile existing projects in India and Myanmar, where with such, like, literally with $5 can make such a difference. And 50 people can be fed with $5. It's amazing. So I feel this would really be the greater good. Our own healing happens, we connect with people, and yeah, at the same time, just with our generosity, we practice generosity, and for the love of giving, and we kind of make the greater collective impact. Okay, good. Now, a very final thing we will do as we close off is we will do a beautiful practice. So now, I mean, this is great. We have many spiritual people here as well. But when we talk about masculine, feminine integration, for me, there are two aspects to it: the physical aspect, or the form aspect, and which has, of course, the man, woman, some of our personality traits and stuff like that. A lot of it we have discussed. Something really beautiful that Sammy touched on as well, where becoming at more energetic level. So please allow me for next few minutes to share some of the teachings and my practice from traditional yogic and sort of traditional tantra point of view, or within Hindu uh, mythology. So in the end, it's just the one ultimate, but when it takes form, so can we can speak about it. The oneness comes, and then two polarities are separated. The masculine, feminine, the masculine side is Shiva. Many of you may have heard of Shiva, Lord Shiva, the initiator of yoga, tantra, and Shakti, the goddess Parvati. And what is really interesting is within both yoga and tantra, traditionally, all the practice is, because you often talk about within men, masculinity, your God self, being conscious man, higher man. Within feminine, we talk a lot about goddesses, Kali and Shakti, and really beautiful things. But in the end, they both are polarities. And also really interesting, Shiva represents masculinity, and but specifically on more spiritual sense, in yoga and tantras, Shiva actually represents consciousness, space, stillness. That's it. Or if you want some more words, and then it's direction, it's purpose. But what's really interesting, guys, is because we sometimes think of taking action as a masculine trend, but it really is not. It's the Shakti. Shakti literally means energy. So the energy to create anything, to take any action, to flow. So when the masculine is truly masculine, actually no action happens. And for me, it was really interesting, and I'll share more in our future events. But when I'm really connecting with my conscious masculine, I actually can't take any actions. I can hold space, I can direct, but for the movement to happen, it the polarity has to come. And yeah, for me, this was really interesting. I briefly shared yesterday. But yeah, so I feel now as I had been a bit more in the Buddhist monk mode, but as I'm, connecting more with actually females as well, this is something really interesting happening. So these are again some juicy topics for future around even conscious relationships and stuff. But for now, the whole idea is not the even goddess self or the god self, but by exploring the polarities, connecting with both polarities, that's what actually brings us to oneness. Then there is no masculinity, no femininity, but collaboration is so important. And Sammy touched on it earlier, that feminine energy is so beautiful, it flows, but it can be very undirected. And with masculine, we can have, if we are a healthy masculine, we can have the space, the stillness, the absolute focus, but no actual movement, no actual energy without the feminine. So yeah, this is where we can truly collaborate. And the idea really is realizing that there's no external person that we necessarily need. Of course, it's fun, it's delicious, and we want that, we can have that. But today, I'd like to end the session with a beautiful practice where the spiritual practice of yoga and tantra is where it's really leading to is connecting with both our masculine and feminine, but on demand, on call. So us truly being masters of our masculine and feminine energy. So what I'd like to do, give you a tiny bit of background. We're not going to go into any details, but in very brief summary, so you know what the practice is really about, is that in yoga, we say there are three main energy channels: the masculine channel, the feminine channel, or if you like Sanskrit word, it's Ida and Pingla, which are both within us in actually two of our sides. And straight down the middle is what is known as the central channel, Sushumna, which is where the true oneness, so both polarities are within us. And when polarities are balanced energetically through practice, then that channel of oneness or the divine connection opens up. And some of you might have heard the term Kundalini, awakening the Kundalini. That's exactly how it's happened. Shaktipat, through Shaktipat or through constant practice. That's what the practice is about, when the chakras are truly aligned and it beautiful light opens up. And this is where we experience the God within us right here, right now. So we will do a beautiful practice and we'll do a simplified version of it. So if I can invite everyone to raise your right hand. And to simplify it, we will use our thumb and your first finger. And we will put your hands gently on both of your nostrils. And what we'll do, we'll breathe in with one nostril and close the other at the same time. And then open the other nostril, breathe out, and continue that. So that's how the masculine and feminine energy channels will be balanced to open up more of the central, the divine energy channel. So if I can invite everyone to perhaps put your thumb on your right nostril and have the left nostril open. And let's start with first just connecting this ourselves and creating that beautiful intention that we want to do this nice little journey together with the collective energy of experiencing oneness, bringing both polarities of masculine and feminine together. Okay. Now let's start with breathing out through the left nostrils. Breathe in through the left nostril. Cover your left nostril, open your right nostril, breathing out through the right nostril. Breathing in through the right nostril, cover the right nostril, open left, breathe out through left. Breathe in through left, cover left, open right, breathe out. Breathe in through right, breathe out through left. Now I'll invite us to do it in the count of 4, because count of 4 is found the optimal to bring the balance. So breathing in for 4, 3, 2, 1, swapping, breathing out 4, 3, 2, 1. Breathe in 1, 2, 3, 4. Breathe out 4, 3, 2, 1 as you alternate your nostrils. Breathing in 4, 3, 2, 1. Breathe out 4, 3, 2, 1. Beautiful. If I can invite you for next minute or so, please continue in your own time. And remembering that by the conscious intention of the powerful collective intention, we will have a much more powerful experience together. So let's tap into the power of the collective here. As we do alternate nostril breathing to bring balance to both our masculine, feminine polarities. So that we experience oneness. Opening up the divine channel within us energetically, so we can physically experience the divine oneness. Beautiful. allowing the beautiful integration to be embodied in our body. Thank you very much, everyone. Big thank you to Yuying and Sammy for your time, for donating your time and sharing your wisdom.
Thank you, Abhi, for creating this. And thank you, everyone, for your presence and participation as well.
Yeah, thank you to everyone for being part of this critical conversation. Much love to all of you.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining in. And yeah, together we can.